All right, what's up, beautiful people? Welcome back to DenofTruth. It's your boy Tino, and today I got the OG guest, the OG. My first guest of the DenofTruth. We got Moreblessing. Moreblessing, how are you?
I'm good.
I'm good. How have you been?
It's been a journey. I was listening to Bobo and Flex's podcast 2 days ago, and they were checking in with each other. Bobo lives in New York. Flex mommy who lives in Sydney, and Lillian was just like, "Look, I'm not good, but I'm better. Like I haven't cried every day, so that's something." And I was like, "Oh, cool." So we've all been doing that. That's good to know. Good to know. Yeah. And I think I even saw yesterday, David Oyelowo was talking to some white lady. I don't know who she is. And then she was like, "How are you holding up?" And he was like, "Hey, look, sometimes you just got to get used to crying every day." And I was like, "What?"
You're like, whoa,
so
chill.
What are we talking about? We're really out here just like in our rooms being like, systems.
Yeah, sister. Like, look, I think what I've been talking about is I think the importance of mental health right now should be at the forefront. You know what I mean? You're looking at your phone and you seeing people being murdered every day. That's not healthy for your mental. And then the continued pressure of being out here, seeing all these different types of things, it's enough to just get your spirit down, man. And that's what I've been feeling. I've been feeling right now is it's like a shared experience, a shared pain.
Yeah.
Because if one person's saying something, maybe. If 100 people are saying something, then maybe. But if you got the whole population of black people talking about, a shared experience, then, I guess it gives you some comfort in knowing that you're not alone. But it's definitely something that I feel like should be at the forefront of what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Even I still haven't watched the Floyd video, and because I hadn't gotten up to watching the Ahmaud video. So I was like, no, I'm not ready. And even before Ahmaud, I was like, I still haven't watched When They See Us. Because I'm like, this is going to fuck me up.
Yeah.
And I'm not set up right now to work through that. So I've been like, pause. Like I have the thumbnail is like burned in my head, but I'm like, I don't. And I think like we were talking about Dave Chappelle's special, it's just like when he was like avoiding watching it, he was like, once you watch that, there's no unseeing that, and there's no way to not feel some type of way after seeing that. And even like, what is the impact of seeing public lynchings so often and very often without context, on demand?
Yeah.
Even thinking of way back when Emmett Till's mum decided to do an open casket, and the impact of having his face in newspapers was like a moment. It was like a thing of like, this is the look at what we're doing. But somehow, I don't know, is it like in the context of like the States, which I don't know what merit I have to speak on, but like, are we normalizing to it like we normalize school shootings? Like,
I think that we're just desensitizing it. You're just very desensitized to certain things. I think that we see it quite often. Like you just said, the Floyd situation happened, but we were just going through the Ahmaud situation.
Yeah, I wasn't.
So, and then a year. My whole thing is that we've seen this episode happen. So if I give you a playbook of everything I'm going to do, and you don't read the playbook, whose fault is that? Right? These are things that have continued to happen, and it's not just happening in America. That's see. I feel like that was just the impetus. That was just if the cup was full, the cup just was now starting to run over. Yeah. Because now you got people in the UK talking about the same thing.
The same thing.
You got people now in Russia, Africans in Africa talking about the same thing. So I guess it's just that we're totally desensitized to it now, where it's becoming a norm, And now you're just seeing people who are fed up with it. I just see a lot of frustration,
Yeah. I think it's really quite emblematic that this time, I mean, there's a range of different things that are happening this time that haven't necessarily happened previous times there've been uprisings. But I think it's also like there's like that notions or the amount of like DMs or I mean I've said it with my chest in my stories. I'm like, don't come to my messages with this foolishness. You will never hear from me again. But like the high school friends I haven't talked to in 6 years being like, hey, how are you going? I'm like,
come on,
I'm gonna need you to turn around and go back.
Yeah.
Or which I'm loving. I see you, I hear you, and I'm like, sis, those are just your senses. Are you looking? Are you watching? Are you listening? Because those are just, you can, seeing and hearing is just like, that means nothing to me. And I think it's that thing of like that frustration coming from being like, okay, cool. So you, even if you do acknowledge this is a thing that's happening, what now?
Yeah. I think for me, I'm just taking a step back because, like you said, I know you've been talking about this since time. And I know, you know what I'm talking about when I say people looking at you like you're crazy or people looking at you like you're radical, right? And then now people hitting you up like, yo, you might have been telling some truth. You might have been telling some truth here. Now you don't look as crazy. You know, so these are a lot of the things that a lot of people have been talking for a lot of time. And I just think that now, look, in a good sense, you know, it's great to have the conversation in the sense of that, you know, we're talking about an issue that, you know, no one wants the children to be raised up in a racist society, but that's the reality for me and you. Yeah. You know what I mean? We're gonna have to have that conversation with some of our kids, you know, or our nephews and nieces, and talk about the realities of this world when they get to that point of where they're like 10 or 11. No, I don't want to have that conversation, but I'm gonna have to have that conversation, you know. So I think it's just a crazy time where I think everyone's got to step back. You don't got to be on social media talking, doing the most, because that's exactly what it is. You're talking, doing the most. And now it's been a week that's been up. What are you doing right now to strategize and mobilize in regards to how are you dealing with you know how? Okay, this is an example that I use. I say, if you want to end racism, the best thing that you can do is go to your family, win that battle. If you can win that battle, then we can start having a conversation on how you can increase that battle. But the conversation starts at home, because at the end of the day, a lot of racism comes from home, you know. And sometimes you gotta make the decision to cut off people in your life or cut off your family members that are creating that type of environment. Because really, are you creating the environment in the future that you want? Are you creating the environment that you want for the future? You know what I mean? If you're choosing to sit down in that environment, then you're a part of the issue. If you're complacent in that and you're okay with that, then you're a part of the issue.
Yeah, I think in tandem with that, and it's really interesting seeing like TikToks and like it was this chaotic TikTok I saw. It's like this white girl, so maybe 15 or something, just popping off at her parents. She's just like, stop calling it the ghetto. It's systematic oppression. It's like I was like, she's red. But I was just like, there was a part of me was like, I can't do those conversations. I also don't want to. Yeah. But someone needs to be doing those. And I think it's that thing of like starting those conversations. But I am also cautious. Like, I always reach this point, like, I remember reading Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed, like, a couple of years ago.
Break that down for us.
He is from, like, Southern America, and he was sort of talking across different axes, like class and different things around how oppression manifests and how, like, potentials or options and how it can be stopped. And I remember I stopped reading it for like a good couple of months when I got to this chapter where he was just like, it's the responsibility is on the oppressed to like free themselves. The oppressor is never going to at some point feel this magical feeling where they're going to be like, damn, that's crazy. I don't want any of this. Like that's never going to happen and we can't wait for it. And power is never given, it's taken. Yeah. And I remember being like, what? We don't have anything. What do you, us?
Yeah.
What? I was so mad. I threw the book. I was like, no, and I didn't go back to it. But then, you know, like you can't dismantle the master's house with the master's tools. Like it's all this stuff, which is like the work of actually creating new systems needs to come from those people. So even though, like, yes, folks who have the safeties to be having the conversations with the people that I don't want to have conversations with, or the people that I don't associate with anymore, you need to put yourself in those spaces to do the work, trademark. Because I'm not going to do it, but someone needs to do it. And I think it's also that thing of like the multi-pronged. Everyone has their own function. Everyone's in their own lane, doing their own thing. And we all need to do our part to hopefully, I don't know, get somewhere.
But like even the last podcast we had, and you talked about a lot, is that we should have been doing these type of things. We should have been strategizing and creating infrastructures where, you know, you got a folk magazine that champions people of color. We should have been doing that. But why is it that, for example, another magazine publication will get more attention than a colored magazine publication? Like, why is it that when the content may just be as good? You know, I think it starts from our mentality. You know, it starts from us. You know, and you know what I'm talking about. Like, black people have this mentality where they always think that the white ice is better. Do you get what I mean? Like, they always think that like anything that is outside of your community will be better than what it is. And I think that comes from self-hate. And this is what I was talking about in regards to like the conversations that we need to have and the strategies that we should have been doing. It's a mentality thing, and it's like people don't realize that a lot of these things, they're in our hands. You know what I mean? A lot of these things, it's like, as soon as we start changing our mentality on how we perceive things and start doing things on our own, the better that we are. Because like you said, the president ain't gonna give you shit. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like, that this time around, what I've found, like, has given me some sort of inkling of, like, maybe things will be different for a bit, is we are having, like, systemic conversations. We're talking, like, institutionalized. We're veering less from here's my uncle who says problematic stuff to being like, oh, P.S., every institution you've ever been in contact with is embedded in white supremacy, which I think is a level we weren't at. And I also think, like, what I noticed, like, post-Christchurch, the Christchurch massacre was the first time in mainstream news media, white supremacy was a word that the main people used. Dropping white supremacy. You couldn't. What? On the morning show? You can't say that.
You've been saying it. I know you've been saying it.
Yeah, and it's just like, and now that we're kind of at this juncture, it's like, oh, okay. So like, this is a big thing. I think we're sort of at this point where we're like, oh, this is a big job.
Yeah.
That goes beyond, like, your friends no longer saying the N-word to, like, on a Kendrick song. And it's like, oh, how are we looking at our healthcare, at our education, at our curriculums? In these conversations about statues, which history are we commemorating? Which history are we literally at the same time destroying and blowing up, you know? Like, we're having these much more denser conversations. On the same token, though, I think those types of conversations are a lot more taxing and take a lot more of you, and they make you realize how complicit you are, even Black folks, in the global enterprise of anti-Blackness. And coming to terms with that is exhausting. And for people who, like I saw on Twitter, it was just like, white people really be out here saying, please be nice to me, it's my second day of not being racist.
Yeah.
It's like people who are like, day 1, day 2, like, I'm 5 days in, where's my chip? That's a lot of work for them to kind of come to terms with having to do. And I'm curious, but maybe not optimistic about how long the drive will be to unlearn and to self-educate and to buy these books and hopefully read them and to do all that work. I don't know how long that will last. And I think it's also a thing of, like, this has happened during Rona.
Yeah, people are angry. People, their lives have just been taken from them.
Yeah, and it's like there's a lot of people encountering being directly impacted by systems for maybe the first time, or to kind of be like, oh, I'm actually like, my freedoms are somewhat being limited by the state.
Yeah.
How do I feel about this? And then also been looking at like tangible things like, because we love capitalism, so many people aren't spending 40 hours a week trying to pay the bills.
Yeah.
And what we're then able to spend that time doing is thinking and questioning and reading and actually being conscious of what's happening around us. But, you know, like the easier thing is let's just like 9 to 5, let's occupy majority of people's mental space with just the immediate needs to survive.
Yeah.
And if you do that, I don't have the time to be worrying about the fact Trump like repealed like trans rights today. Like, I'm really just trying to pay my power bill.
Yeah.
Or I need to just hop on, like, I just finished my job, I need to go do Ubering for the next 5 hours. I just need to listen to like 2GB or like FBI. I'm full. I don't have the space to accommodate how big everything is.
And I think it's like you were just talking about, a lot of it, or a lot of the activism has been on social media. And like you said, that's cool. It's cool to get the word around. It's cool that now the word is getting to different algorithms, and it's not the same people talking about the same issues over and over again. But like you said, I think now with coronavirus, people who are at home have sort of realized and taken a step back and looked at their own lives and looked at how they're adding value to people's lives, how they're adding value to their own lives, and whether their actions have sort of been conducive to a future that they want to have. I think that's also played a big part of it. And like you said, this is going to be a lot of work. You know, this is not a week thing, you know, and I don't think people understand that game, what we're talking about. This is not a week thing, because I've been talking about this for 24 years.
Yeah,
People
500 years. Like,
we've been talking about this issue. So it is a continuous conversation. But I think when we were talking about it a little bit about it, like, you really got to start to focus and think about the future that you want to have for your kids. If I think that message is a lot more relatable to a lot of people, because when I look at the kids now, and I've been sort of impressed by it. But even when you look at different types of primary schools or that I've seen at school, things like they're dismantling. For example, when we went to primary school, what was skin color to you? Like, you know when they're like, can you get the pencil? And they're like, yo, get skin color. What? That was beige. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So how early did it start for me and you? Do you know what I mean? Small things like that, they don't do things like that anymore. Or small things like, you know, slowly starting to reduce the amount of history that we used to talk about Captain Cook. It's not, you know, people always talk about, we're trying to steal the history. Okay, well, look, to be honest with you, I'm going to tell you the truth. If a black man was murdering a bunch of white people, I would not celebrate him, because he's murdering a group of people. A lot of people think that it's like we're trying to take your culture, we're trying to take your history. It's not that. It's you understanding that years of suppression, years of stealing, years of structural racism, it's littered everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, and especially when you see it in Australia, I think the one thing about Australian culture, which is one of the benefits, but it's also its biggest downfall, is Australians are very laid back in regards to how they perceive everything, which makes it a lot easier for you to live here because people here are laid back. But also when you start talking about these serious types of conversations, then you know, people, they don't want to, they distance it they distance it. And I had to go through the education myself because I wasn't really educated on the Indigenous plight. I to be honest, I never understood to what you know, to what degree that these people went through the same thing as we went through in Africa. They went through the same thing that the Americans went through with slavery. You know, I had to educate myself and just listen to what other people are saying because I didn't know how bad it was here. And then to the point where Indigenous people aren't recognized in the Constitution. That's crazy to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that is, think about that, you know, just think about that. You know, this is where your people are from. This is where your culture is from. You've got thousands of years in this country, and you're not even recognized by the law of this country.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I remember during Sydney Festival this year, I went to a panel. It's called like Rethinking Nationalism, and it was chaired by a whole bunch of First Nations folks from like academics and journalists and artists, including the artistic director of the festival, Wesley Enoch. And I remember him saying of like, I guess we're sort of like looking at how we understand our nationhood. And it was like, he articulated it by saying like, this is like 250 something years of European settlement on this country. And by refusing to, like, you're not losing anything by acknowledging the 65,000 plus years. You're only gaining.
Yeah.
And he was sort of talking about how like Australia also sees itself and plays in like the global arena and being like, we, especially under like the current office, but generally we always see ourselves as like the younger sibling in the playground of all the other countries. Like America and the UK are our older siblings, and we follow suit. Like we'll go to their wars, we'll do these things because, hey, we're only 250 years old. We don't know how this happens. America, you guys had a whole revolution. Like let's. What do you guys have to say? And being like, no. Like you're the oldest. In this game, and the power dynamic and the way that we then enter these conversations is like, oh, well, I don't know. I'm young. Oh, I'm still going to get it wrong. I'm young. And being like, no, you're purposely like redacting all of this wisdom and knowledge and stories. And obviously it's not working for you. Yeah, it's... Yeah,
even Scott Morrison today came out saying, there was no slavery in Australia. And I was like, see, the thing about him, why I don't give him a pass is that you're the prime minister of a country. You got the top job. You got the top job in Australia. Any type of information that you want to get, you have access it in a click. You can get anything that you want in Australia. You got the top job, right? So at that point when he said that speech, I refuse to believe that he's not proofread. Do you know? So I refuse to believe that the Prime Minister comes out, the Prime Minister of Australia, one of the top countries in the world, doesn't proofread his speeches. So he goes out and says there was no slavery in Australia. And I was just like, see, but for me, that's the issue. A lot of people don't understand with whatever is happening, like that is the issue. You have the issue of a grown man choosing, like it's a choice now, because you can't say that the Prime Minister of Australia is dumb. He is not dumb. He's an educated man, someone who has been through, you know, he's had success in his life. So you're telling me that he is choosing to be ignorant? I don't buy that.
If he's choosing to be ignorant, why are we accepting that? That shouldn't be an option.
You know?
Yeah, and even like in the same conversations that have all been happening in all of this, and I think it was part of like that, we're sort of looking at the bigger picture of how we've ended up here, because it's not just because the whole world is upset about a single man dying in Minneapolis. It's like this whole thing of being like, even looking like when Chris Lilly's shows got like pulled from Netflix and being like, I don't even think now we have Tongan representation on Australian television. So really out here,
not much.
For like 10 years, our reference for Tongan people and culture has been a white man in brownface. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah.
And being like, well, like we don't get to a point where the Prime Minister, whoops, I forgot we had slavery by accident. We got there because who's telling our stories? Who's telling the histories? Who's giving the commentary? Who's breaking down all these like press? Who are the journalists who were posing him questions? Who were the journalists who weren't there who would have been like, no, it happened.
Yeah.
You know, like there's so many
layers to it.
Layers.
And what you just said, that's pretty much exactly how I've been feeling. It's like, yo, it's like even you look at the Prime Minister saying that, it's like, it's not just him. It's not him in the house. It's like, who was his assistant? Who was there anyone who just said, hey, I think
I'm gonna pop in real quick.
yeah, I just think what you said there is wrong. So let's just not say that, and we can just do this. That's how you know that in that room there was no one there to say that. And just to piggyback on that is like, now let's talk like we were talking a little bit about brands and organizations and stuff like that. And I always say like, I think it's cool that, like, for example, music labels have donated a certain amount of money. I think it's cool that things like YouTube. But, like, YouTube made $19.4 billion in revenue last year.
Yeah.
Right? What's 100 million
platforms.
What's 100 million over 5 years? Especially to a culture that gives you so much value and validity, you know? Because and this is just a theory. This is a Tino's theory. Right. If you look at this is my little segment. I gotta make this into a Tino stereotype thing. But I think if you look at black people, you look at the industry that we profit from the most of. We profit the most of, and where we have the most control is culture. Culture in general, right? So that being said, shit. What was my train of thought? What was I gonna say?
Tino's theories.
Yeah. So that being said, it's like, we give our industry to so many different types of companies, and we don't even demand any type of, you know, we don't have. I think it's our fault, but we don't have control over that. It's like, we're giving you our industry, we're giving you cultural validity, and you're saying you made $19.4 billion from us, but you want to give us $100 million over 5 years
as a treat.
Yeah, for me, that does not make sense. But that being said, let's be fair, though. Whose fault is that? Because we have a lot of responsibility to that as well, right? Because we've been complicit in a way that we haven't said anything, and we've just been putting our hands out, right? I think this is the best time for us to mobilize, focus on platforms like folk magazines, where you got people who have been championing the culture from time, you know, people who have been empowering creatives of color for a long period of time. Putting your money there. Not all the time. Yeah. We got to give it a Gucci, Louis Vuitton, like Vogue. Not all the time, man.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it was really good critique even like on that Vogue point of like, I always forget her name. Homegirl, Vogue chick, Met Gala, Anna Wintour.
Anna Wintour, yeah.
She's really out here, and she said with her full chest, I've been the editor for 30-something years, and I'm afraid to say that we have not invested in enough black talent. I'm like, sis, that is well within your power. Like, don't come out here being like Vogue Limited just hasn't pulled its weight. I'm like, no, like, that's you. Don't come out here giving me a PNG file so I can, like, pull myself on the Vogue cover. Fuck out of here. Yeah. Pay me, pay the artist, pay the crew, and put us on your cover. And even on the same thing of like what we consider as success, being on the cover of Vogue is still seen as a valid metric of success, even for black folks. And I think as consumers, even in that thing of like we're all uniformly complicit in all these systems, that I don't think we consciously spend as much as we should. In that, if it's like, all right, cool, so this is where Vogue's at, these are where all these brands are at, they're realizing racism is a thing, where am I investing my money? And money talks. What's yours saying? Essentially. Like the same conversations we're having around like, oh, guys, P.S., like most super funds don't invest in the things that align with your values. Yeah. Move your money. Same thing with brand loyalty. Like, why is, if Vogue ain't aligning with your values, take your money elsewhere. Especially like now, it's like end of financial year in like the theatre world where I spend most of my time being frustrated. All these theatre companies, it's interesting because like because of COVID, theatres and like live performance venues are probably like the last places that are going to be allowed to be open. Yeah. So we're going to lose a whole lot of money. And I empathize with that. And I'm like, there's a lot of artists, especially because of the way we structure things, artists as individuals are the last people to get anything. Yeah. Like, we're going to pay for admin and printing and everything else before we pay artists. And I get that. So we need to support artists and culture makers, but I'm also like, I'm keeping my receipts. I'm marking my dockets and I'm like, oh, cool. So you've never, in your like 50-something years, ever produced a work by any Afro-descendant peoples. But
Cool.
we're talking like, you just haven't done that. Interesting, cool. I'm going to take a note. And then being like, okay, so now you're sending me an email being like, hey, do you want to make a tax-deductible donation? No, that's not what I'm doing. I'm going to look at creatives. I'm going to look at independent producers. I'm going to look at publishers. I'm going to look at musicians. I'm going to Venmo them. I'm going to divest my funds from the places that don't
support you.
Yeah.
And I think
don't buy from where they won't hire.
and as I said, I think black people control culture, man. So we have the power to do that there, especially there. You know, we have the power to ask that question. I mean, look at these record labels. Okay, let's talk about which artists are making the most amount of money in the world right now. Which artists are controlling culture, right? That being said, what are you doing? Right? If you really want to have the conversation about, oh, let's help renegotiate some of those contracts. Give some of the artists back some of their royalties and some of their percentages back into what they're doing. If you really want to have that conversation, if you really talk about, you know, some of these contracts are like slave work. You know what I mean? Imagine you right now. Look, I take that back a little bit because I think that you signed the contract. You know, you should, you know, I think every single individual now in 2020 should at least have the ability to read the contract and have that independent, you know, decision making. But that being said, it's like now people are realizing that it's not worth it anymore. You know what I mean? Because these brands are trying to say, oh, you know, we're of the culture, we're doing this, but what, you know, or even like if you can Google, for most corporations, you can Google who's on the board. Right, so you can Google who's on the board, and then they have to.
Why are you yelling? You know?
Like you can Google, like you know what they look like. You can Google the board, right? I'm like, I challenge anyone. Google your favorite company, and then look at the board or who's on the board. You'd be surprised, and that's what the issue is. It's not enough to like,
just
all right,
remove the urban category.
Yeah, it's not enough to remove the urban category. That's cool because, you know, I just had Blessdini, and we were talking about the same thing. He was just saying that, you know, urban is pretty much the same thing as saying nigga. What's the difference? Imagine making a whole category called urban. It's like, what? Crazy. But yeah, back to that. It's like, yo, look at the board of your company. It's not enough just to chuck in a couple diverse people in the company because they're not making the decisions. You gotta start from the executive level up, and you gotta start like I said, Google your favorite company's board, and then rephrase this and let's get back to this. You know.
I think it's also a thing of like once you have that information, holding people accountable, which I found really exhausting in the last week, is like in tandem with people being like, all right, cool, this is a thing that's happening, this is crazy, let's do something. I'm like, no, I am so tired.
Yeah.
I am not. And then they're like, guys, I love it, I appreciate it, but they're like, no, we can't do anything. We need to be led by Black people. We need to hear from them how they want us to like do shit. I see it, but this week I should be in bed like 20 hours of the week. Like, I'm not here waiting to Zoom you so then we can make a task force on how we're going to hold these. No. On one hand, I'm like, you should have been knowing. Like, we shouldn't be here like on the battlefront and you're like, wait, so like, so what was the plan? So what are we doing? No. This is it. This is like the moment. Do the things. To
do the work, man.
And I think it's also that thing of like, because brands are, I'm cynical, but also I know how money works. Alignment, I was talking to people, I was just like, one market thing I can see has changed with the Black Lives Matter movement this time round is it has become viable both commercially and culturally to align yourself and your brand with the movement.
Yep.
If you align yourself as an individual with the movement, you are somewhat morally right or a good person or an ally or whatever. If you're a brand, you stand for ubiquitous terms like equality and justice or whatever.
Justice. Yeah, hashtag.
Like you are more likely to get backlash for not doing or saying anything as a brand than serving lip service. I can see it. So it's been like, okay, cool. So we're doing all these public displays of black squares and white hands and black hands holding hands.
Yeah.
And fucking, I don't know, hate with love. I like all of that stuff. So if we're going to take it out to the streets where it all began, and you want to cash in, because that's what they're doing. Again, cashing into the culture that is coming out of this resistance movement. Yeah. If you want to cash in from that and you want to do your posts, I'm putting the argument in your comments. I'm not emailing you privately. Let's have this conversation out here. Like, okay, cool, black hands, white hands. So how much have you donated? Who to? When? Show us your board. What are your strategies? What's your action plan? Do you have a decolonial action plan? Do you have an anti-racism action plan? Who's your diversity officer? Oh, you don't have one? Who are your black faculty members? Oh, there's none? That's crazy. Like, come on. We're doing receipts and we're doing them in public.
Yeah, especially if you want to. My big issue is if you want to profit from the culture. That's why I get a bit... I get a bit pissed off. It's like a lot of these brands that profiting of the culture, they're quiet right now, man. And like people need to understand, like we see who you are. So when this calms down, let's say it might be next week, 6 months, when eventually it calms down, and you're going to want to start kicking your business off, and you're going to start rolling it out. People are going to remember who was silent. Because I feel like if you were silent, you were complicit.
Yeah.
Silence is the same for me as complicit. You know, even I keep going back to this, but like even Louis Vuitton, it's like they ain't posted nothing about it.
And I love it because it's like these people, like we're really out here checking in on the brands. Like we're going to, I went back to Apple's like Twitter, Instagram, all their things, like every 2 days being like, oh, so we guys, it's fine. We're really useful for selling AirPods, but not like our lives. Ew.
Yeah, okay. No, not that.
Ew.
Yeah.
Disgusting. Oh, that's crazy. You guys used to have a black woman as your diversity vice president, and then she got replaced by a white woman, and then the role got dissolved. That's crazy. Anyway, so where's your statement? Nah, okay, we're still waiting. Oh, okay. Oh, so we're now donating like 100 million to fighting justice. All right. So where's your board again? Where are your vice presidents again?
Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. Yeah, I think it's that thing of like, I don't know if it's a survival thing, but it's I don't know. You know your allies. You got to keep tabs on who's ready to fight.
And it's the beast of capitalism. You know that I think a lot of people, in understanding what we're saying, I also understand the beast of capitalism, and I understand the beast of, like you said, like you literally just said, it's profitable to be of the cause right now. Extremely profitable. Yeah. But you know what? That being said, it's going to happen and that's okay. So now what we're going to do with that?
I think I was talking about it because I was just like the fight to abolish apartheid had the point. Like things started moving when money got involved.
Yeah.
When people started boycotting, when people stopped trading, that's when they were like, damn, that's crazy. I guess black people can like walk on the footpath.
Yeah.
You know, like and being like, I don't know, maybe we need Pandora to co-sign Black Lives Matter.
Yeah,
and we can like stop police brutality. I don't know. And even like when you were saying about like Australian culture being so laid back, I just reached that point. I had this like really frustrating conversation because I was just like looking at what's happening globally and being like, I feel like Australia is skirting past it. Like I feel like we could really easily get away with not having a reckoning here. Like we're seeing these sort of like upheavals and like organizations and companies doing stuff, but 9 times out of 10 they're based overseas.
Yeah.
And they're feeling the pressure there and it
trickle downs
onto us.
Yeah.
What we're doing here is saying, no, guys, we shouldn't destroy culture. Chris Lilly is the pinnacle of Australian culture. What are you doing? No, bring it back. We're fighting for Gone with the Wind. We don't want Captain Cook statue. Like, we've got like 200 cops defending a statue at like 9 p.m. Like, that's where we're at in this conversation. We're having conversations about whether slavery happened here.
Literally, we literally having that conversation.
We're not, and I think it's a thing of we don't like, I'm not sure how this tracks historically, but we like to make change when we're comfortable. Like we'll do a plebiscite on marriage equality. Like
what's that? Explain that to me.
So that was like 2017, like the marriage equality plebiscite. Like instead of just like letting people protest and then just changing, we're gonna, hey guys, I need you to calm down, and then we're gonna spend all this money on like a survey, and then maybe we might change our minds. Okay, just calm down. Or same thing with like Invasion Day rallies. Every time it comes to Jan 26, it's like, whoa, okay, it's a lot of yelling. I'm going to need you to chill out.
Where did this come from?
Well, exactly.
Where did this come from?
And then it's just going to be like, I'm going to need you to calm down. Then we'll look at your little statement, you know? And even like realizing that last Saturday's rally, like the amount of rallies that I've been to was the first time I've been to a protest that wasn't authorized. And I was like, wait, hang on. And I think that's what it was on Twitter. It's just like, so a protest with permission is just a parade. Like you
literally,
be around here being like, okay, we'll let you do your little thing. You can walk over. Even like the fact that halfway through the protest, they were like, no, we've changed our minds. You guys have to stop here. I was like, the fuck?
Yeah.
That's not how any of this works. But because, you know, and I think I was hearing someone saying yesterday that like in Canberra, there's like a lawn which is designated for protest. So if you apply for a protest permit, the protest happens on this designated lawn. So you got to stay on this patch of grass, and that's where you do your
That's a parade.
protest,
Yeah.
and then you go home. It's just like, all right, you do your thing, but once you've calmed down, then we can have a conversation. And I think, which is frustrating because it's like, okay, cool. So it's just going to be however many more deaths and continued intrinsic systemic like oppression until you guys feel comfortable with the idea of maybe making minor reform.
What were your thoughts on the protest?
The ones on Saturday?
Yeah.
I talked to a couple of friends after it and realized, like, especially talking to Black folks, I was like, realized, like, put words to what I experienced, because from 8 p.m. the night before, when it was unauthorized, where they lost their permit, till 5 minutes before the protest started, when thousands of people were already there. Everyone, and I went to bed with this, anxiety of being like, and also based off, the only images of unauthorized protests that I've seen is what we're seeing overseas.
Yeah.
When it comes to Black lives. I'm like, okay, so I'm really in bed right now preparing myself to enter hostile territory.
Yeah.
That was hours of just prep, emotionally, physically, logistically, making sure I could text friends or have people I could contact if I needed to be picked up ASAP. Writing lawyers' numbers on my arm. I remember even writing my mum's number on my arm. I know my mum's number. And then the thought occurred to me. I'm like, okay, so I'm writing my mum's number on my arm in the case that I'm not conscious enough to tell someone my mum's number. Is that
what we're doing? Yeah.
That's what I'm doing. And then being like, okay, I'm accepting that that's a reality. And make preparing yourself, doing all that prep to arrive in a space where you're there's anticipating violence that's some fucked up shit to do to people.
So what are we talking about right now? What exactly are we doing? You can break it down, take a step back.
And then I arrived, and it was that thing of not knowing when it was gonna pop off. You're they could decide at any point, you guys are breaking COVID restrictions, lock them up. It was just that.
Yeah.
Until 5 minutes before, when the appeal was successful. And I was like, I'm exhausted.
Already,
I was on flight or fight. I was here. And then you'd be like, just kidding.
Just kidding. 5 minutes before the day.
5 minutes before? You can't play with people like that.
Yeah.
And so that night, I'm waiting for when we're ready to have the conversation about how we're glorifying peaceful protest. I'm waiting for.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit, because I
don't know. Are we ready? I don't know. Like,
I think we're ready.
Peaceful protest. The goal is that what we're waiting for, and why is it? Why? And even like seeing people post about it, I'm like, look, guys, they can be so well behaved. I know they were savages before, but look, they've just got really nice posters. Like, the fuck?
Yeah.
I have every right to be mad. Solange said. Like,
it's like, sorry to cut you off. It's like,
God.
like, for example, you look at the French Revolution, and you look at French people when they protest now.
I want
it's like you see the French, and it's like any time there is any issue publicly, socially, these guys, it looks like they're army revolution ready to be prepared to fight, go all the way until there is some sort of change. And do they not get it every time nearly? They get it every time nearly. Like I said, I think it also goes back to our culture as Australians. Very laid back, very passive. Very, Australia, well, obviously the Indigenous people had a history of fighting back in the system, but I feel like outside of that, we really haven't had a history of, I wouldn't call it public disorder, but really protesting, like really being out there and fighting for what you believe in. So now when we have these protests, it's sort of just like, let's hold hands and let's protest and let's hold these flags. But even if you look at where we're from Zimbabwe, it's like, we come from a history of people who know how to protest. You got some people that they had to leave their family for 14 years just so someone has a right to vote, just so someone has a right to be seen as a human being. Are people willing to take that sacrifice? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Things like that. It's just weird. It's weird seeing these very peaceful protests, because it's like, what does it really achieve? It's great to see people coming together, and it's great to get the word out, but what is it really achieving?
So even thinking of like the climate strikes end of last year, like across the country, like maybe the third biggest like protest action.
Yeah.
Domain had like hundreds of thousands of people there. But it was literally, all right, you guys can go to this park for like an hour and a half and then you disperse. It was a peaceful, let's just give these people some time to talk about their feelings about the climate. And then that was it.
They can bounce.
What was the action we did? Did Adani get stopped? No, Rio Tinto blew up a 45,000-year-old Indigenous, like what were we, is that like, yeah, I don't know. But then I think it's also that thing of like what David Chappelle was talking about of like, we're mad. Yeah. And I don't know why you're confused.
Confused as to why, yeah.
And I was like, even marching, I was just like, I was yelling because I was like, that's really all you guys are letting me do. That's the only way I'm currently allowed to express this frustration within.
And even, Did we talk about that Dave Chappelle special? Did we talk about that?
No, we talked about it before.
Off there?
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about it on there. So even with the Dave Chappelle special, man, for people who haven't watched it, please watch it, man. Great. It's great content. Articulates himself great. Laid back environment. And I think for me, it just summed up exactly how I was feeling. I was like this. Like what I enjoyed about it was the way that he says is like people, the streets are the ones who are talking. People have been talking about this issue from time now. This is not something that's new, so don't act like it's new because that's insulting. When you act like this happened this year just because of Ahmad and George, for me that's assaulting. Yeah, these are the type of issues people have been talking about for years, and then on top of that, what kills me is that. One of the things I've been doing is, and I know a lot of people have been doing, is reading a lot of, because now you can listen to it on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever you use. Listen to a lot of Malcolm X's speeches. Listen to a lot of Martin Luther King speeches, Marcus Garvey's,
Not just Die for Dream.
Yeah. Listen to their speeches and listen to what they're talking about. And listen to what they're talking about just in regards to a lot of black people, a lot of people of our own, we can't take everyone with us to the promised land. In regards to, there's a lot of black people out there who, man, they just gravel to their master. Do you know what I mean? And I'm talking about like people like Candace Owen, like people who think that they speak for the black culture, I think people who are undermining years of hard work or just trying to do things just to appease other people, who are using their own personal incentive, whether that's your employment, whether that is people who you're associated with, just to try to sound nice. I guess how I see it is that everyone in the slave house, they didn't know they were slaves, so they couldn't take everyone with them. Mm-hmm. That's the reality of it. And I think I'm a nice guy, so I'm always thinking everyone can come with us. But not everyone's going to be able to come with us. Because a big part of it now is I think what we're talking about is great. And everything that we're feeling is exactly how we're feeling. Because we know it, because I know you've been talking about this for a while. I've been talking about this for a while, but now we got to get to the point now where it's like we got to have constructive action, where now our responsibility is to wake the fuck up. I think that's our responsibility. Mm-hmm. Our responsibility is to get people to actually start saying things for how they are, rather than just following these trends, rather than just making this a moment in time. I just been seeing a lot of like black people just so unconscious. Like if you're not gonna say anything, then what do you think is gonna happen? Nothing's gonna happen. If you're just gonna keep being quiet, what do you think is gonna happen?
Mm-hmm. Zora Neale Hurst's quote where she talks about if you don't say anything, they'll kill you and say that you enjoyed it. And I think I was watching a doco which was about Audre Lorde's sort of like last couple of years in Germany.
Who's that, for people who don't know?
Audre Lorde is like essayist, poet, lesbian, black. I don't know what era. But yeah, writes a lot of great stuff. And I think like the latter part of her life, she lived in Germany and was sort of part of, from the documentary, like cultivating like an Afro-German identity or movement. Because before that, apparently it was just like everyone just referred to black people in Germany as mulattoes, and that was just what that was.
Yeah.
That was chaotic. But like she reads a poem at the end of it, and she was just like essentially it was just like, you should, when we speak, we worry that we'll be silenced. When we don't speak, we worry that nothing will happen, and like these sort of constant contradictories. And then she was like, so speak while you can, because you were never meant to survive. And like just that sort of thing of being like, and I think there is like a fear, which is probably legitimate. Like, we're not fools for thinking that the system will clamp down or doors will be closed if we do use our, like, say with our chest, like we've learned from viewing, from seeing, from stories. Like it's not an unfounded fear, but what's the cost?
Yeah,
I guess.
Yeah.
What's the flip side of not doing or saying anything?
It's going to be continuous.
Yeah.
It's just, it doesn't end, because even, when people say, let's hold hands and pray. That's what they said. That's what they told you to do 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And then that's what they told them to do 10 years ago.
Yeah, we've been fighting hate with love.
Yeah, for a long time.
Yeah.
So if we keep doing the same thing, then maybe we're the ones with the issue. Maybe we're the ones who are keep doing, like I said, the playbook's been given to you. It's literally been given to you in detail. People have been through the same thing, just in decades and decades. If at this point you're choosing not to switch yourself on, then you're just gonna be trapped in that same cycle over and over again. I'm not trying to be a part of that cycle. Mm-hmm.
I think it's the thing as well you're saying around like trying to take people with us, and I think a big part, I even think like the movement trademark can grow in is sort of expanding, and also like Black folks also doing the work themselves. So I'm also always very conscious of that. I am often seen or approached as an expert on the things, and I know all the things and the right things to say and do, and I'm not. I didn't know about the histories of most of the things until I did my Googles. Like it's all a relative journey, and I think being conscious of like things like the fact like they passed Breonna's law, mm-hmm. And I'm like, but we're still not going to charge the cops. So you acknowledge what happened with Breonna was wrong, but we're not going to charge the cops that killed her? Is that... And being conscious of like, okay, even, I mean, like there were these critiques like way back when we were talking about Michael Brown and Philando and Sandra and things like that, that the narratives that we are centering, and I think it was really interesting when Chappelle also pointed it out when he was talking about the black man in his neighborhood who got killed by the cops the same week Michael Brown did.
That's crazy.
Michael Brown was the story that happened. Also, it sucks that there's like, oh, there's so many. We'll see which
which one we can relate to.
Which one's going to be the one for the week. That like I'm very conscious that black male deaths have been at the front of this movement and being like, black trans women are probably dying way faster and more frequently than the rest of us, and being like, what am I doing? What's the work that I need to be doing to decenter myself or narratives that I think will work? And I think it's that same thing of like with that sort of comparing stories and being like, what's gonna have more traction?
Yeah.
Which life has lost is gonna get us more? And being like, all right, cool. So do we need to assess why we think talking about Breonna is not going to, like, putting Breonna as the face of this one isn't going to get us as far as George. I mean, also, Breonna didn't have a video. That's a whole other conversation around why Pixar didn't happen racism.
Yeah.
Like, how long is that going to help us? But, yeah, is it just not going to track as well if we talk about trans and queer black folks dying, because they are part of the Black Lives That Matter.
Most definitely.
So what are we, as a community or even as organizers or as a larger global, everyone kumbaya, why, like, I think like the same critique that brand made of you guys like reduce your likes and comments when we post about black people. That's a you thing. You need to check that. And being like, for us, what are the things we need to check about ourselves?
That's an us thing. Yeah.
Even in that larger community, what is it about us as a larger community that is going to feel somewhat less empathic or somewhat less outraged if we're talking about a trans or a non-binary person? Or like what's going on there? Check that, fix that, then come correct. Yeah. And then you're going to have to do it again. It's like we're all on a constant sort of thing.
Yeah.
I think I was even talking about anti-racism or practicing being an anti-racist, because that seems to be like, that's the thing we're doing now, which I also think partially we might be, I think maybe in 6 years there's been adequate critiques on allyship. So people feel like they need a new, like they see it as a job title.
Yeah.
Instead of like they treat it as a noun, not a verb.
Yeah.
So they're like, oh yeah, being an ally is gross. I'm anti-racist. Yeah. And that's going to be it. Like I bought, why I'm no longer talking to white people about race. I bought White Fragility. Yeah. See you guys? And then it's just sitting on the bookshelf, never read. And kind of being like, I can constantly reminding people that these things, like this, we all are complicit in anti-blackness, even within black communities.
Yep.
So how are we actively all working towards being, like, working towards or practicing anti-racism? Because it's not like we're going to reach this point where we read all the books and listened to all the podcasts and signed all the petitions, and it's going to be like that, that meme format where it's just like gets more like space university.
Yeah, and then goes to the dimension.
Yeah. You're not going to reach a point where it's going to be like ultimate anti-racist.
I get you.
Yeah, you're not going to reach a point where Malcolm X is going to ordain you. Like it's not going to happen.
It's and that's just that's what people don't understand. It's just like, just take a step back and just reflect on yourself. That's all you got to do. And
it's that thing of
start with
it's
you.
It's not a sprint. It's a marathon. Yeah. Get ready to
do the work.
Do the long work. Yeah.
So talk about folk magazines. You know, how are you guys being affected by COVID?
Oh, geez, it was chaotic. I had on one hand, I'm not good at managing my time. So I already had probably a very stressful year planned.
Yeah.
Because I was also writing a play, writing a show, launching an issue of a magazine, opening an exhibition in the space of like 2-3 months. So I was going to have a bad time anyway.
Yeah.
But it was like we just bumped in the exhibition. The magazine was supposed to launch that Saturday, and going from Monday to Tuesday and just realizing how much has changed in 24 hours and being like, I don't know if this is going to happen. I don't think this is going to happen. This is probably not going to happen. And it was also that thing of how quickly things were changing and trying to keep on top of that. So we ended up like cancelling all of our events. We'll hopefully be able to do the exhibition again. But it was then, you know, it was also this thing of like, I was also very conscious that a lot of artists had just lost like 6 months worth of work. Like we were just like my calendar just went from scary to just a different type of scary.
Whoa.
Yeah, and I was just like, oh, okay.
Shit.
Yeah, and then so then we like made the call because we do have funding, which is not something to take lightly, and we're like, we already budgeted to pay all these people.
Yeah.
Let's just still pay them.
Yeah.
Like, it ain't anybody's fault.
Yeah.
We'll find the money somewhere else. At like the bare minimum, this like $500,000 invoice is just like a little buffer before, and especially because we work exclusively with Black, Indigenous and POC artists, it's like,
you know they're going to be affected.
It
ain't going to be
worse,
easy.
You know, and they're not going to be, it's not going to be as easy for them to get back up.
Yeah.
When all these productions and whatever start up again, it's going to be the heads of department hiring their friends because they know their friends had a really tough time during COVID. They're not going to be out here starting diversity initiatives. That's not what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So then was able to get the issue out, launched online, the bunch of pre-orders, and I think we achieved different things, which I was quite excited about with this issue, and got to co-edit it with Khalid Wasami, who's based in Melbourne. So 2 Black editors, graphics by a Black woman. Spotlight was on Amrita Hepi, who's an Indigenous choreographer, dancer. And I think we were able to get really great works across a wide spectrum of identities and forms as well. Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to doing more. But it's also the thing, like, I'm constantly learning. I'm like, every issue, I'm like,
I could have did this better.
I'm relearning design.
I gotta redo everything that I learned. But you know what? The work that you do is important because people see it. You know, people need to see a magazine that champions people are doing things that they're already doing. I don't think you probably don't realize the importance of it. When people see a magazine like that, and you know, it's like it's diverse, it's like art which is relevant, you know, and it's curated in such a professional way. You know, like I said, not all the time Vogue. Sometimes it has to be folk.
Sometimes.
You know what I'm saying? Sometimes it got to be like
guys,
that.
That's it.
Yeah, that's the you got to take this soundbite and then you can send it.
Yeah, and even thinking of like when we're talking about like creating and curating culture with Afro Sisters as well, which is hopefully going to be going into production on the other side of all of this. It's been really interesting as well seeing the various different outputs of Afro-Australian culture specifically, especially because I think maybe we're reaching like the tipping point where it's like, actually, I don't think it's as helpful for us to keep referring to, or to keep and solely keep referring to African-American and Black British ways of being. Like that, it's not
our way of being.
Yeah,
it's not it.
Fitting as well. So it's really been exciting seeing all these different platforms, like the work that Saudi Systems are doing. I just love them.
The people, man, the good people, the good people.
Even the anthology of growing up African in Australia and being like, there is a culmination of like a documenting or trying to understand what it means to be Black here.
Yeah. You know what I like about you? And I knew why I wanted to talk to you because I understand that. You understand that. The importance of documentation and then how and how impactful that's going to be like in 5 years, 10 years time. You know what I mean? The documentation of shit is just so important, and it has to be in different lanes.
Yeah.
It's got to be in magazines. It's got to be in events. It's got to be in podcasting, music, radio. People have to see that, and for that to develop, you need so many different people to understand that.
Yeah.
You know, and I knew you understood that because even on the first one we were talking about, the first podcast, we talked a lot about that. We talked a lot about representation, and it was crazy you say that because. You know, I think when I rewatched that, some of the stuff you were talking, especially you were talking about representation within theatre, right? I think that went over my head at that time, right? And then I had for work or something. It was a work event. We had to they paid for us to go to this theatre thing.
Oh, really?
Right.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, and
So I don't imagine it was a good. It was.
Yeah, and I went there, and the only thing that I could remember was yo. What Blessings was saying was true. There was no representation. Now everything sort of came back to what we were talking about.
What'd you watch?
I don't know, man. It was some non-English shit.
That's how impactful it was. I love it.
Yeah, look, it was not English. It was theater. It was my first theme, but
wow.
Yeah, and I was just like, okay, so this is. It was just very weird to me. You know, it's just you cannot say Australia is not that diverse where you can't at least have one. You know, you can't say that.
You can't say we're a multicultural country and still have Sunrise away. You know, you can't have the both. You can't.
Shout
and I think there was also Junkie, did the Googles and put it together, but because it happened because the insiders, which is just political journalists talking about what's happened in politics this week. It's been running for years, but. Uniquely because the conversations are around the Black Lives Matter movement right now, globally and here, we've been seeing that all the journalists we're sending over there are just white folks who just making us look bad. That then you had this show that was all right, guys, let's talk about Black Lives Matter. And it was white folks. And then people were like, no, this ain't it. So then people did their Googles and then it was looks like they haven't had any non-white person on there for 3 years. And then someone did further Googles and looked through the whole ABC archive of all accessible Insiders episodes and was guys, I don't think they've ever had any.
Not ever. One.
Not one, ever. And then this weekend they were okay guys, it's fine. We're having this is gonna be an Indigenous woman. And I was guys, it's a decade plus. What are you doing? You can't have them both.
Yeah. You can't try to do both.
You can't have Scott Morrison saying garam masala and then be out here. No, you can't do it. I don't make the rules. You can't.
But you know what, Blessing? To wrap it up, I need you to give us some practical solutions. Where can people go? What are some websites? What do you reckon is the best way for people who, let's say they don't have the information or the education, where can they go and where can they donate and do different things?
Well, there's a lot of book lists going around, which are great, and a lot of people put work into them. Book reading is also not everyone's game. I will say if you are looking at buying books, don't go to Amazon. Don't go to Book Depository. Amazon bought them. I don't know. Go to your library because the writers get paid when it gets stocked. If the library doesn't have it, ask them to stock it. The writer gets paid, and the writer gets paid every time it gets loaned out, and you don't have to fork out money. Do the readings if you want to. There's also a whole bunch of people who are candidly talking about their experiences on podcasts and IGTVs and things like that. So tap into those people.
Who are some of those people?
Algorithm as well. Bobo and Flex, which is a podcast with Flex.Mami at Flex.Mami and Bobo Machilla, is great. And I find it really fascinating because Bobo is South African living in New York and Lillian is Ghanaian living in Australia. And the conversations that they have across the Pacific Ocean are really quite insightful. Fufu and Tibbs, which is a podcast that's coming out of here in Sydney, is really good and is sort of this is
good experience.
Yeah, this is Western Sydney. This I know this type of conversation around blackness. If you are a non-black person with any type of platform, I'm gonna say hand it over.
Mm.
Like, I mean, if you've also got money, like even if it's $100, like I'm not doing any unpaid work also during this time. Like, we're not doing, not right now.
All right, doing that diversity consultant.
Yeah, I'm
Nah,
not doing that. I'm not putting all this black content on your feed for free and then leaving.
Yeah.
No thanks. But if you have a platform, put money behind it and just let us do it. So I think it was also that thing, I saw this like graphic, which was like this overlaying circles that were like going down, and it was like from like black activists down to like neo-Nazi white supremacists.
Yeah.
And being like, this circle is never going to talk to this circle. And their timelines are never going to overlap. But the black activists are going to overlap with some like other black people who are going to overlap with some white and non-black allies who are going to overlap with their families and friends from high school who don't really engage in politics. And they're going to overlap with some 5G like conspiracy theory people who are going to overlap with some Pepe the Frog people who are then going to overlap with some white supremacist people. And just being like, just play your part in letting the information flow down. I mean, also, it can also work the other way, but we're not doing that right now. But play your part, like being like, okay, so if you have access to platforms and audiences that this person doesn't have,
plug it.
Do it.
Plug it.
Yeah.
But you know what?
And also put your money where your mouth is. Always.
So look, Blessing, thank you very much. Where can people find you? Can you plug yourself real quick?
Super quick. I'm at Moreblessing MA on everything. She's efficient. Of course. And Folk Magazine is at the Folk Mag on all platforms, and Afro Sisters is at Afro Sistars, SISTAHS.
Yes. Yes. Look, thank you very much, Blessing. And okay, nice. Thanks.